You're not smiling enough in meetings. That's what Sarah from HR told me in the hallway after our Q2 all hands. I had just walked off stage after presenting a 12-month strategic roadmap that shaved $3.4 million off operating spend, plugged 2 procurement loopholes, and rerouted 3 failing vendor contracts. The applause had barely died when Sarah slithered up in her oat-colored cardigan and said it. I just flunked a beauty pageant instead of saving their bleeding balance sheet. I knew then something was rotting under the laminate floorboards. I had been with Apex Solutions since before it had a damn name, back when it was just 4 of us huddled in a co-working conference room with burnt coffee and a dream. I wrote the first operations manual. I built the vendor network from scratch. I negotiated the logistics partnership that got us into national retail chains. Every step of the way, I stayed in the shadows, made it about the team, let the founders take the stage, clapped when they clapped, laughed when I was supposed to. But over time, the boys in blazers turned into suits in corner offices, and I stayed where I was, director of strategic ops, quietly fixing what they broke, delivering results like clockwork. Staff trusted me. Managers respected me. But the C-suite? They'd always had that look, like I was the designated adult in a room full of summer interns, the one who ruined their fantasy that running a company was just vibes and venture capital. And I could live with that until the language started changing. Suddenly, my quarterly reviews weren't about performance metrics anymore. They were about emotional tone, about how I made people feel. No names, no incidents, just a fog of vague concern. All trying to cultivate a more collaborative energy, Sarah had said last time, eyes darting to her laptop screen like even she was bored by her script. Leadership is about more than just results. What the hell else is it about? Then there was the Team Chemistry Initiative. It sounded like a summer camp icebreaker, but it turned out to be a series of mandatory workshops led by a consultant named Jax, who once described himself unironically as a vision doula. He sat on yoga balls while he talked about energetic boundaries and passed around a plush toy named Barry the Boundaries Bear. I watched as mid-level managers took notes like they were studying for the SATs. Meanwhile, my face must have been doing something uncooperative because Sarah took me aside afterward and said, I might want to consider softening my presence. Not long after that, my name got dropped from the monthly leadership agenda. My badge stopped working on the 16th floor executive wing. They called it a glitch. It fixed it. Then it glitched again. Funny how those glitches only ever seemed to affect me. And the whispers, Jesus. I'd walk into a meeting, and half the room would suddenly remember they had a quick Slack message to send. I caught my own project analyst, a brilliant, terrified kid named Alex, abandon a conversation mid-sentence the moment I stepped into the kitchen. I gave her a knowing look. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Still, I kept showing up, kept fixing things, kept taking the messes the execs made and spinning them into gold like some MBA-grade Rumpelstiltskin. But the writing was on the wall. Or maybe it was in the bathroom, in dry erase marker on the mirror, right next to the passive-aggressive cleanup after yourself sign. Culture over competence. I stared at that for a full minute. Culture over competence. Someone had written it like it was gospel, like it made sense. That week, I started backing up everything. Emails, project drafts, budget spreadsheets, contract red lines. Not because I thought I was about to be fired, but because I felt it in my bones. A chill in the air no thermostat could fix. They weren't just isolating me. They were preparing something. And if I had any hope of understanding what, I'd have to be ready for whatever came next. The strategy meeting had been locked on my calendar for 3 weeks. Wednesday, 10 a.m., conference room E, same as always. I even built the deck myself, loaded with visuals so clean even the CFO couldn't butcher them in his inevitable tangent about synergistic timelines. But when I showed up, the room was empty. Not just empty, reset, chairs tucked, whiteboard wiped, the monitor off. I checked my phone. Nothing. Email. just the usual pile of budget approvals and Sarah's weekly wellness moment. I refreshed. Still nothing. I stood there for a moment, alone in a room that should have been humming with nervous energy and too much coffee. Then I walked to the end of the hall and peeked into conference room B. There they were, all of them. CEO, CFO, 2 VPs, and half the damn marketing team. Lights down, deck on screen, coffee cups in hand. My deck. I recognized the layout, color codes, even the goddamn typo I hadn't fixed yet. Only now the title said, Prepared by Dylan Mercer, VP Strategic Alignment. Dylan, who 2 months ago asked me what EBITDA stood for. I opened the door. Heads turned like I'd walked in mid-funeral. Dylan froze mid-sentence. The CEO gave a slow, casual smile, the kind that's trying real hard not to look like panic. "Oh," he said. "Sorry, we had to move the meeting last minute. But you got the update?" "I didn't," I said, locking eyes with him. "Well, it was kind of a quick shift," Dylan mumbled, flipping to the next slide like nothing happened. I stayed for exactly 13 more seconds, just long enough to make sure every eye in that room saw the shift in mine from confusion to clarity. That night, I sent an email to Dylan, CC'd the CEO and HR. Subject line, clarification on project ownership. Strategic Ops Deck. It was short, polite, dangerous in how calm it was. Hi Dylan, notice the deck I developed for Wednesday's meeting was presented today under your name. Assuming this was an oversight, would appreciate clarification moving forward regarding attribution of work and communication of schedule changes. Thanks, Leah. No reply. I waited 24 hours. Still nothing. Just silence, thick enough to choke on. By Friday, I was hearing it from all angles. 2 project managers who used to ping me hourly had gone quiet. A product lead canceled our weekly sync with a vague pivot in priorities. Even my seat in the cafeteria, the one by the window everyone knew was unofficially mine, had someone else in it, a junior exec I didn't recognize, eating overpriced quinoa and laughing a little too loud. Then Alex, the analyst I'd caught ghosting a conversation last week, slipped into my office like a shadow. She looked pale, nervous, like a kid handing in a forged permission slip. "Don't tell anyone we talked," she whispered, glancing behind her like Sarah was going to rappel down from the ceiling. "I won't," I said. "What's going on?" "They're trying to push you out," she said. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. "I figured," I said. She bit her lip. "They've been scrubbing names off stuff, reassigning credit. The leadership Slack has a private thread, Project Sunlight. I only saw it for a second. Your name came up. There's a doc floating around, like a list of misalignment risks. You're on it, top of the list." "Thanks," I said quietly. She nodded once and slipped out like she'd never been there. I stared out the window for a long time after that. Across the street, a construction crew was jackhammering pavement, loud, unrelenting, methodical. Same thing was happening here, just quieter. And the rubble was me. I waited until late afternoon to approach my boss. Timing matters in this place. Catch someone too early, and they've still got coffee bravado. Too late, and they're rushing for spin class or scotch. I picked 4:17 p.m., when his blood sugar dips and his inbox starts to drown him. His door was cracked open, and he was halfway through stabbing a Caesar salad that looked like it had personally wronged him. "Got a second?" I asked, already stepping in. He looked up, a plastic fork pausing midair like it was waiting for legal counsel. "Sure," he said, a little too casually. "What's up?" "I want to talk about the strategy deck that got presented Wednesday, the one Dylan walked through." A tight smile, teeth, but no warmth. "Right. There was a scheduling hiccup. We were on a deadline and needed someone available to walk the investors through it. And removing my name entirely?" He shrugged. Wasn't personal. It's a team effort. Attribution doesn't really matter when we're all working toward the same goals. Except some of us built that effort from the ground up, I said, voice level. And some of us had no idea it was even being shown. Look, he said, dropping the fork and sitting back. I get it. You're feeling sidelined, but it's not about credit. It's about fit. That word. That damn word again. He leaned forward like he was about to share a profound secret. There's been talk, about tone, about collaboration. Some folks feel like you're not flowing with the culture lately. Culture being defined by whom? I asked. He smiled again. Leadership is a feeling. Jesus Christ. I walked out before I'd said something that would be carved into HR meeting transcripts forever. 2 days later, I got the calendar invite. Subject line, Quarterly Culture Alignment Check-in from Sarah. No explanation, no prep doc, just a time, a Zoom link, a passive-aggressive smiley face in the body. I showed up, jaw clenched. Sarah and a man I didn't recognize were already on camera. He introduced himself as a leadership values integration consultant. Kill me. They asked vague questions. How do you think your energy affects group outcomes? Do you feel emotionally safe expressing vulnerability in a team setting? I told them the truth, but professionally. I mentioned KPIs, impact metrics, tension figures under my org. I talked about leading during the pandemic, about stabilizing logistics when global shipping collapsed. They nodded like I was explaining plumbing to a toddler. A week later, I got the results. My score: low alignment, areas for growth, tone, adaptability, emotional congruence with executive vision. What the hell did that even mean? Did they want me to sob at all hands meetings? Gluten-free muffins for Dylan's project team? I didn't reply to the email. I didn't schedule the follow-up Sarah requested. I opened a new Google Drive folder and titled it Red Folder. I started small. Email threads, project decks with timestamps, old Slack messages where I was credited directly, screenshots, internal budget documents I had access to from legacy ops permissions. A few of them made my pulse skip. An invoice had double entries with the same timestamp, a bonus approval for a VP that predated the finalized performance reviews. Nothing damning yet, but something smelled off. Then it happened. I went to badge into the executive wing for a weekly reporting sync, and nothing. Red light, buzz, no click. I tried again, same thing. I stepped back and tried to laugh it off with the front desk receptionist, who suddenly couldn't make eye contact. Said it must have changed some permissions, said someone would look into it. No one did. Next day, I got a new invite. Same meeting, different location. Basement floor, a windowless conference room near the mailroom. That night, I added something new to the red folder. A screenshot of the badge error, time-stamped. I labeled it Phase Shift Begins. They weren't even being subtle anymore, but I still thought I could fix it. I thought if I just laid out the facts, appealed to logic, delivered enough value, they'd see reason. Because surely no one's dumb enough to gut the one person who's been quietly holding the roof up, right? They called it a check-in. No warning, no calendar invite. Just Sarah appearing outside my office like a store mannequin with a clipboard and that same Stepford smile. Hey, you have a quick sec to come with me? Not would you mind. Just come with me, like I'd already said yes. Led me into conference room C, the one with no windows and those fake ferns that reek of Febreze and abandonment. 2 chairs, 1 box of tissues, a folder already sitting on the table like it had been waiting all week. Inside, Sarah, some other HR goon I'd never seen, and Dylan, who sat like a nervous prom date, hands folded, not quite looking at me. No one offered coffee. No one made a joke. Sarah took a breath like she was about to read the weather. After careful review, she began. We've determined that your current leadership style and cultural alignment are no longer in sync with the evolving vision of the company. She might as well have said, "You've expired. Thanks for playing." I didn't speak. Not at first. I looked at Dylan. He blinked, then looked at the fake fern. "You're citing culture?" I asked. Sarah smiled like I just asked where babies come from. "We value your contributions deeply," she said. "The organization is shifting toward a more empathetic, collaborative framework." "And what exactly was unempathetic about restructuring your entire supply chain to prevent layoffs?" I said, voice calm but sharp. Dylan coughed into his hand. The HR man looked at his notes like they might jump up and explain themselves. Sarah slid the folder toward me like she was feeding a wild animal. Inside, severance offer, NDA, exit instructions, laptop return checklist. Everything already dated and signed on their end. I picked up the paper and flipped to the NDA clause. Paragraph 12. No discussion of company operations. No mention of whistleblower protections. Interesting. How soon do you need the laptop? I asked flatly. End of day would be ideal, Sarah chirped. I stared at the logo on the folder. Clean font, polished corners, like betrayal should be laminated. "Fine," I said. "I'd like an exit interview." A pause, a flicker of something ugly behind Sarah's eyes. "Oh," she said, caught off guard. "Most employees don't request those." "Well," I said, standing, "I'm not most employees." They looked at each other, whispered. Then Sarah nodded. "We can schedule that," she said. I walked out like I wasn't falling apart. My steps didn't falter until I hit the stairwell, away from the eyes, the cameras, the curated smiles. That's when I pulled out my phone. One message, just 4 words. They did it. Sent to a number I hadn't used in over a year. My mentor. The man who'd believed in me when this company was just drywall and ambition. The man who'd invested more than money. He'd staked his reputation, groomed the execs, opened the damn doors. No read receipt. No reply. Maybe he was done with me too. I took the long way back to my office. No one made eye contact. Few people looked like they wanted to say something, but swallowed it down. Safety in silence. When I opened the door, my desk had already been cleared. Boxes neat, tidy, like my entire career could be folded and labeled. I didn't cry. Not there. I placed my access badge on the keyboard, my office keys next to it. I looked around one last time, waiting to feel something. Then I saw it. A sticky note, neon pink, pressed gently to my monitor. "You for having our backs." No name, no handwriting I recognized. Just that. It was the only thing I took with me. The exit interview was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp. But I showed up at 8:45. I wanted to control the room. Let them walk into my silence. Let them feel what it's like to sit in front of someone who knows the truth and won't flinch. Sarah came in first, holding a tablet and 2 branded pens like she was hosting a damn webinar. Behind her was a guy I didn't recognize. Gray suit, thick glasses, clipboard. Probably legal. They always bring legal when they think you might bleed out loud. We sat. She clicked record. "I want to thank you again for your time and contributions." I held up a hand. "You can skip the eulogy." Her mouth twitched, but she nodded. "This is an opportunity for mutual closure." I didn't answer, just sat arms crossed, letting the silence stretch like a pulled muscle. She started the questions. "How would you describe your experience with leadership? What did you find challenging about team dynamics? What are your plans moving forward?" I gave vague answers, non-committal empty calories. And then mid-sentence, her sentence, something about team coherence. The door burst open. Not knocked, not cracked, burst. And in walked Alton Price, in a three-piece charcoal suit, black leather notebook in one hand, aviators still on like he'd walked straight out of a courtroom and into a funeral he didn't RSVP for. Sarah's jaw actually dropped. Legal guy stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. Alton didn't say a word at first. He looked at me, just looked. Then he gave the smallest nod, barely there. Then he turned to Sarah. "Is this a joke?" he said. She blinked. Mr. Price, I wasn't aware you fired her," he said, calm as a sharpened blade. She was let go due to a misalignment of... "If she's out," he said, flipping open his notebook and pulling out a letter with a thick blue signature. "My $75 million is out too. Effective immediately." You could feel the panic ripple through the air. Sarah's face lost all color. The legal guy reached for his phone like he was about to call every person in his contacts labeled crisis. I looked at Alton and tried to find words. Any words. He didn't give me the chance. "You want to walk away?" he asked me directly. I'd understand. "They don't deserve what you built." "Hell, I should have pulled my money a year ago." I looked down at the table, the folder, my resignation by force. "You came all the way here for me," I said. He took off his aviators and slipped them into his jacket pocket. "I came because I know when I'm being lied to, and I know when someone's being scapegoated to cover it." Silence. "Need someone to find the rot?" he said quietly, precisely, before it spreads to the boardroom. I studied him. "You want me to go back?" "No," he said. "I want you to go deeper. You'll have my backing. Full discretion. You find out what's really going on in this place, and when the dust settles, I'll fund whatever future you want. Company, foundation, offshore vengeance yacht, name it." I stared at him. All I had wanted was someone, anyone, to say this wasn't my fault. I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't too difficult, too intense, too tone-deaf to the culture. And here he was, offering me not just validation, but a weapon. I looked at Sarah. Her mouth was frozen open like a broken toy. Then I looked at Alton. "You'll give me full access?" He smiled. "No NDA, no handcuffs, just truth." Something in me clicked back into place. Not hope, not pride. Something colder, sharper. A switch flipped to war. "Then let's begin," I said. I didn't go back as an employee. That ship had sunk and taken all the life jackets with it. I returned as something quieter, sharper. Alton arranged it through a shell consultancy, one of those vague names like BlackRock Solutions that sounds official but says nothing. My badge read vendor. My access said otherwise. The C-suite barely looked at me when I passed in the hall. Some assumed I was auditing logistics. Others thought I was part of Alton's portfolio review. Few looked worried. Good. They should have. I kept my eyes low and my ears open. In a company obsessed with culture, it was amazing how much you could hear when people thought you didn't count. I started with finance. Always start with the numbers. They never lie. They just get dressed up for presentation. I reached out to two contacts I trusted, Monica in corporate accounting and Jessie in internal audit. Monica had been through 3 CFOs. Jessie never missed a decimal. I scheduled catch-up coffees that somehow never left private Slack chats. Monica's first message was simple. "You didn't hear this from me, but someone's cooking the Q4 numbers." Then she sent me a spreadsheet. Q4 revenue booked before contracts were signed. Deferred expenses mysteriously reclassified as client acquisition costs. I checked the audit trail metadata. Last edits, Dylan Mercer and a finance VP named Clark, who used to fall asleep in his own webinars. Jessie followed up 2 days later with a PDF titled Reclassification Adjustments, Internal Use Only. Inside, adjustments that shifted loss-making products onto profitable verticals, legal speak that turned black ink red, then back to black, like financial necromancy. But the part that made me sit down, a column labeled Whistle Response Budget, line items, payouts, NDAs with former employees I knew had left without explanation. 2 of them had tried to warn me last year. One ended up relocating for family reasons a week after an internal complaint. The other was walked out mid-meeting. Their silence hadn't been voluntary. It had been purchased. I felt it then. Not anger, not even betrayal. Just clarity, like my blood was freezing into glass. That night, I created a new folder on a separate encrypted drive. Operation Paper Trail. I gave it sections: revenue tampering, silent settlements, internal Slack extractions, board deception tactics. Each document got a label. Each email got a screenshot. Each spreadsheet was exported twice, once raw, once annotated. I wasn't hoarding evidence. I was building a trigger. I started mapping the chain of complicity. CFO to Dylan, Dylan to Legal Eagle to HR, HR back to Sarah, and woven through it all, lines that pointed straight to the CEO, smiling through quarterly calls like the house wasn't already on fire. The most damning doc came from Jesse, slipped via an anonymous Dropbox link. A summary of compliance deviations, signed off with initials that matched the CEO's own. But the cherry on top? A revised cap table, time-stamped 3 weeks before my firing, showed pre-approved equity reallocations that weren't filed with the board. They hadn't just been pushing me out to change culture. They were re-sculpting the company in their image, and anyone who didn't fit that image got erased. By the end of that week, I'd filled 63 pages, 10 gigabytes of screenshots, and one flowchart titled Chain of Rot, with arrows in red that looked like blood. I no longer cared about reclaiming my old job. I wanted to bury the whole damn machine. And I was just getting started. Someone in IT had screwed up. It was the tiniest oversight, probably a checkbox in some HR offboarding flowchart left blank by an intern rushing to beat traffic. But they forgot to deactivate my old login. The same credentials I'd used to access the whistleblower portal when I helped shut down a vendor kickback scheme 3 years ago. It still worked. I found out on a Tuesday, 11:42 p.m., long after the office lights were off and only the janitorial crew remained. I logged in out of habit, expecting a denial, but instead the screen blinked to life. Internal ethics and compliance reporting. Welcome. Access level. Elevated. Permissions. Submit. Archive. Distribute. Exec visibility tier. My breath didn't hitch. My pulse didn't spike. I just stared at the screen, mouse hovering over the Submit New Report button, the way a surgeon might hesitate before the first cut. Then I clicked. I spent 2 hours drafting the first file. Not everything, just enough to get attention without giving away too much. A taste of falsified quarterly revenue tied to unaudited product lines. I included embedded formulas with cell traces and screenshots, each one watermarked and stripped of metadata. I submitted it to the internal system anonymously, of course, but also blind copied it to a trusted regulator contact at FINRA. Then a sanitized version to a journalist I knew from my college days, someone who owed me after I buried a story that could have cost his paper a libel suit. The title of the file was blunt. Forecast Fraud Pattern 6A confirmed. The next morning, everything felt normal, eerily so. Coffee machine still broken. Dylan still strutting like he invented pivot tables. Sarah still parading around in a new floral scarf like she hadn't tried to end my career with a smile. But under the surface, wires were humming. That afternoon, Monica pinged me. One line. They called me in, asked who I've been talking to. Didn't deny anything, just watched. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. No words. By Thursday, Jesse was reassigned. Lateral move to procurement oversight. No formal announcement. Texted me late that night. This is the first time I felt scared. They're not guessing anymore. I wanted to tell him to run, but I knew he wouldn't. And that's what gutted me. Everyone helping me knew the risk, knew they could be next, and they did it anyway. Because somewhere along the line, this place had become a cult in khakis, one that punished honesty, rewarded rot, and buried the inconvenient under phrases like realignment and new direction. I launched the second leak that weekend, this one heavier, a combo of payroll anomalies tied to C-suite bonuses during net loss quarters, nicknamed Hush Cycle 3B. I watched the email bounce through the encrypted route like a game of digital pinball. 10 hops, 12 servers. By the time it hit its target, not even God could have traced it. Sunday night, Alton called. No hello? Just going to come after you. I know. I mean, really come after you. Poking the bear with a cattle prod. Better than playing dead? I said. Silence. Then his voice dropped into that cold, steady cadence that used to send junior analysts into panic sweats. Make sure your documents are off-site and your name stays out of this until it's time. I've got everything backed up. You ready? He asked. Not, are you safe? Not, do you need help? Just, are you ready? I closed my eyes, saw Jesse's transfer memo, Monica's silence, the sticky note on my monitor. The war they thought they'd already won. Yes, I said, then hung up. Monday would be the spark. I had one more file to send, and it had names. The headlines hit before sunrise. Midwest Tech, darling accused of fabricating revenue reports ahead of IPO. Insider trades linked to executive bonuses. Sources say leaked HR emails reveal culture of retaliation, silence, payouts. It was like someone had thrown a match into a hay barn soaked in gasoline. My phone, which hadn't buzzed in weeks, lit up like it had been resuscitated. Calls from numbers I hadn't seen since college. Former coworkers, journalists, recruiters, suddenly interested in your unique leadership lens. I didn't answer a single one. I just stared at the screen while sipping black coffee from a chipped mug in a rented co-working conference room 3 blocks from Apex Solutions Tower. Outside, I could hear sirens. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm wailed like it knew too much. Inside the building, chaos. I imagined Sarah clicking through her inbox, watching a decade's worth of scrubbed threads and soft-coded threats surface like sewage in a rainstorm. I imagined Dylan trying to explain why his name was on 6 different projections, each with a different forecast and no audit trail. And the CEO, I hoped he was reading the same line I'd read at 5:14 a.m., buried in a financial blog's deep dive. Early documents suggest a coordinated effort between HR, legal, and C-suite executives to suppress whistleblower activity and manipulate board oversight. Coordinated effort meant conspiracy. That meant charges. By noon, the board had called an emergency meeting. The email was meant for leadership plus legal only, but I saw it anyway. Monica still had access and quietly forwarded it to a dummy inbox we'd set up 3 weeks ago. Subject: Board session urgent, governance crisis. Location: Executive Suite, floor 16. Time: 1:30 p.m. I texted Alton. We're going. His reply came instantly. Already in the lobby. I changed out of my hoodie into a blazer I hadn't touched since they canned me. Pulled my hair back, deleted my name from the building's visitor log, walked in through the back service elevator. No one stopped us. Not the front desk, not security. Not even when I flashed my old badge, now expired, but still looking very official. The boardroom doors were already closed when we arrived. Murmurs leaked through the frosted glass. Voices rising, one name repeating. Mine. I opened the door without knocking. The room snapped silent. 12 board members, 2 legal reps, 1 CEO with a tie already half loosened and sweat under his collar. Sarah in the corner, pale and frozen like a rejected stage actor waiting for her cue. And Alton, who strolled in behind me like he owned the oxygen in the room. "Nice of you all to finally start talking," he said, then took a seat at the head of the table like he'd never left. The CEO tried to recover first. He stood up. "She doesn't belong here. She built this company," Alton snapped. "Sit down." And for the first time, the man actually did. I stepped forward and placed a folder on the table, the same kind we all use during quarterly ops reviews. I opened it. Inside, a printed copy of my severance agreement. Paragraph 14, I said, tapping the page. Non-disparagement clause and NDA tied to my termination. Legal team started shifting, but no one began. I slid a second page across the table. An addendum, dated and signed, quietly slipped into my original packet the day they fired me. I'd seen it immediately, but kept it in my pocket because it had one clause they hadn't read closely enough. In the event of verified corporate fraud or criminal activity, this agreement shall be rendered null and void. Dead silence. I watched their faces, one by one, go slack. "This is verified fraud," I said, "and I've kept receipts." Alton nodded. "She's protected, and as of this morning, I've initiated proceedings to freeze my remaining investment until the board conducts an independent investigation. If that doesn't happen within 72 hours, I'm not just pulling my funds, I'm taking 3 other major investors with me." The CEO opened his mouth, closed it. "I recommend you all read the files," I said, pushing a USB stick across the table. "There are more, but this will do for today." I didn't wait for applause. I turned, walked out, and didn't look back. I could hear Alton's voice behind me, steady and final. "Either she goes back in as board advisor, or you all go out in handcuffs." And just like that, the building that once tried to erase me was now rewriting its bylaws around my name. But I wasn't done. Not yet. They reconvened the next morning. Same boardroom, same suits, but the mood was different. No more PR polish, no more smirks, just a long, cold table of people who knew the dam had cracked and the water was coming for their homes. I walked in at 8:59 a.m. on the dot. Alton was already seated, a glass of water in front of him, untouched. He wore black today, not charcoal, not navy. Black, like he was attending a funeral, or maybe delivering one. I didn't sit. I stood at the far end of the table, placed a manila folder in front of me, and looked each of them in the eye. "Let's begin." I started with the misused funds. Slide after slide of reallocations that violated internal protocols, approved by people whose titles magically didn't exist when questioned. I pulled up an expense log, $30,000 labeled as employee development, directly to a private resort where the CMO had hosted a silent yoga retreat for potential investors' spouses. No minutes, no contracts, just champagne and plausible deniability. Then came the firing. Mine, labeled as cultural divergence, but paired by sheer accident or arrogance with internal HR chats where Sarah called me a potential disruption to leadership narrative. I read the message out loud. Pause to let the words settle like ash. Next, the hostile work environment. Screenshots, surveys that never made it to the board packet, employee exit interviews buried by system migration. One woman described being pressured to attend unpaid weekend retreats. Another said she was asked to smile more during one-on-one reviews. Both gone, both paid off, both silenced. And finally, the crown jewel, the SEC violations. Revenue reported before contracts were finalized. Insider trades tied to pre-earning stock tips. CEO initiated backdating on stock options. Documents with his digital signature and IP logs to match. I printed one, held it in the air. This one alone gets you 5 years. You could hear a pen drop, maybe even a soul. The CEO stood, shaky, but trying to find his spine. "You don't have jurisdiction." She does, Alton cut in, slow and surgical, because she's the one who exposed all of it. I'm the one who's funding your next breath, or not. He leaned forward. I'm pulling every dollar I've ever put in, effective today, unless both you and Sarah resign now, in writing. No severance, no parachutes. Sarah made a noise like she was choking on air. The CEO looked around the room, waiting for support. None came. One board member, a retired judge, gray hair like frost, simply nodded at the papers in my hand and said, "Do the right thing." That was the end. CEO signed. Sarah tried to negotiate, then broke. When security arrived 15 minutes later, neither made eye contact. The CEO left in silence. Sarah sobbed quietly into a tissue she hadn't brought herself. Someone handed it to her. I didn't. The board offered me a permanent position, an advisory seat, stock options. Apologies with practiced inflection. I declined. I'm done cleaning up other people's messes. As I walked out, I passed a young assistant near the elevators. Alex. She looked like she hadn't slept, but her eyes met mine this time. I paused beside her and leaned in, just enough for only her to hear. You're not a culture fit either, I whispered. That's a compliment. Her lips trembled. She didn't speak, but she didn't look away. 2 weeks later, I filed the paperwork for a new fund. One fully owned, operated, and staffed by the ones they'd called misaligned. The quiet ones, the too smart, too blunt, the ones who'd been run off by corporate fakery and fragile egos in expensive shoes. We called it Signal Fund. Our tagline? Clarity over comfort. Alton invested the first $10 million. I matched him with the severance money they'd offered, still sitting untouched in my account. I never looked back. But I did send the board a thank you card. No return address, just one line. Next time, read the fine print. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers. Lesson learned. This story shows that true value often lies beyond surface impressions and corporate buzzwords. While culture fit can be a genuine asset, it can also be weaponized to silence competence and perpetuate wrongdoing. It's a reminder to trust your instincts, document everything, and stand firm in your truth, even when it feels like the world is against you. Positive message. For all those who have felt undervalued or pushed aside for being too much or not enough in a corporate setting, remember that your unique skills and integrity are your greatest strengths. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo when you know something is wrong. Your voice, backed by evidence and conviction, can indeed change the world, or at least the boardroom. Focus on clarity over comfort and never let anyone dim your signal.